A new crisis has erupted, sending shockwaves across the continent and beyond. On the North American continent, a situation is unfolding that few could have anticipated just months ago. Tensions between the United States and Canada have reached an unprecedented peak, straining a relationship that has long been considered one of the world's most stable. The world's longest undefended border, once a symbol of trust and cooperation, is now a flashpoint of geopolitical conflict. In a stunning move, the Canadian government has initiated a blockade of the U.S. state of Alaska, severing its primary land route to the rest of the country and effectively isolating it. This action has created a logistical and political nightmare for Washington, with supply chains disrupted and critical resources delayed. The sudden escalation followed simmering trade and environmental disputes, but few predicted such a drastic measure would be taken so abruptly. Canada's decision marks a fundamental shift in its foreign policy, leveraging its vast geography as a powerful tool of pressure against its southern neighbor. The blockade, though not military in nature, is deeply disruptive, challenging decades of seamless North American integration and cooperation. President Donald Trump's response has been swift and severe, framing Canada's action as a direct affront to American sovereignty and national pride. The White House has promised robust retaliation, escalating rhetoric and setting the stage for a dangerous tit-for-tat conflict that could spiral out of control. The stability of the entire region now hangs in the balance, with millions of ordinary citizens anxiously watching events unfold. This is more than a diplomatic spat, it's a test of the modern international order and the institutions designed to keep peace. The US-Canada relationship, long a model of peaceful coexistence and mutual benefit, is now under serious threat. Shared values, integrated economies, and joint defense through NORAD are all at risk, raising concerns about the future of continental security. The crisis raises difficult questions about sovereignty, national interest, and the limits of cooperation between even the closest of allies. As of August 11, 2025, the border remains restricted with no sign of resolution in sight. The standoff continues, with negotiators locked in tense discussions and no clear path to de-escalation. The consequences of failure could be catastrophic for both nations, impacting economies, families, and the very fabric of daily life. The world is watching closely as this high-stakes confrontation unfolds, uncertain of what the next chapter will bring. Canada has suspended non-essential transit through its western territories, a move that has sent shockwaves through both sides of the border. This action has effectively blockaded Alaska's main land link, the legendary Alaska Highway, a route that has connected the state to the rest of the continent for decades. This historic road, vital for the movement of goods and people, is now closed off, isolating Alaska and forcing all ground transportation to reroute by sea or air, which is far more expensive and logistically challenging. Canadian officers are now turning away U.S. vehicles unless they have special permits, which are only granted for critical supplies like food, fuel, and medical equipment. As a result, traffic has dropped by a staggering 95%, grinding cross-border commerce to a near standstill and leaving businesses scrambling for alternatives. Ottawa cites environmental and sovereignty concerns as the official reasons, but most analysts agree this is a strategic power play designed to force the U.S. to the negotiating table. Alaska is hit especially hard. An estimated 75% of its inbound goods rely on the highway, making the state uniquely vulnerable to such disruptions. Supermarkets in Anchorage and Fairbanks are already feeling the strain, with shelves growing sparse and shipping costs for basic goods soaring to new highs. The port of Anchorage is now overwhelmed by the sudden surge in container traffic, as everything from groceries to construction materials must arrive by sea. For everyday Alaskans, the blockade means higher prices, more frequent shortages, and a stark reminder of just how geographically isolated their state truly is. Canada is using its unique geographic position to exert a kind of pressure rarely seen in North American history, reshaping the region's political landscape. The blockade's impact is immediate and severe, with supply chains disrupted and uncertainty growing by the day. Alaska's dependence on a foreign nation for its only land connection to the rest of the U.S. has never been more obvious, raising urgent questions about the state's future resilience. While this crisis is unprecedented, U.S.-Canada relations have seen tension before. The border was once a site of conflict, notably during the War of 1812 and later disputes over territory and resources. The Alaska boundary dispute and the 54, 40 or fight era left legacies of mistrust. Yet the 20th century brought deep cooperation, building the Alaska Highway in Witu and creating NORAD. The border became a symbol of shared security and prosperity. Still, trade and resource disputes have persisted, usually managed through diplomacy and legal frameworks. Today's blockade marks a sharp break from that tradition. Canada is using territorial control as leverage, escalating disagreements into direct confrontation. The post-war norm of negotiation has been upended. The border, once a bridge, is now a weapon in a high-stakes standoff. President Trump's response has been swift and aggressive, fully embodying his America First doctrine and signaling a new era in U.S. foreign policy. He immediately imposed a sweeping 25% tariff on all Canadian goods entering the United States, a dramatic escalation that threatens to disrupt key sectors of Canada's economy, from manufacturing to agriculture. The administration justified this move by citing national security concerns, invoking Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act, a rarely used legal tool that gives the president broad authority. All major bilateral agreements, including the USMCA trade deal and long-standing security pacts, are now under review, casting uncertainty over years of cooperation. The White House has even hinted at the possibility of further restrictions, potentially targeting the vital Great Lakes Seaway, a critical artery for North American trade. In response to potential supply disruptions, Operation Alaskan Resolve has begun, with the U.S. military now supplying Alaska by both air and sea to ensure no region is left vulnerable. The administration's strategy is one of overwhelming force, designed to compel Canada to back down through pressure, rather than open negotiation or compromise. This hardline approach risks further escalation and could inflict serious harm on both economies, with ripple effects felt by workers and businesses on both sides of the border. Critics are calling for renewed diplomacy and dialogue, but Trump's supporters argue that only strength and resolve can protect American interests in this standoff. The administration is betting that Canada, under mounting economic pressure, will not be able to withstand the pain for long and will eventually yield. The stakes are incredibly high, and the outcome remains deeply uncertain, with both nations facing unpredictable consequences. America's closest alliance is now on the brink, with the future of U.S.-Canada relations hanging in the balance. The economic fallout is immediate and severe. U.S.-Canada trade, one of the world's largest, is in turmoil. The 25% U.S. tariff has sent shockwaves through both economies. The Toronto Stock Exchange plunged, and the Canadian dollar hit decade lows. Canada's export-driven sectors, automotive, are especially vulnerable. Canada's export-driven sectors, energy, are especially vulnerable. Canada's export-driven sectors, agriculture, are especially vulnerable. U.S. farmers and manufacturers are also at risk, as Canada prepares retaliatory tariffs. American consumers face higher prices on everything from lumber to groceries. Alaska's cost of living is projected to jump 15% due to shipping disruptions. The state's tourism industry faces a catastrophic season. The Port of Anchorage is overwhelmed, unable to fully replace the lost land route. Operation Alaskan Resolve is costing U.S. taxpayers hundreds of millions per month. Both nations are suffering with no end in sight. The economic pain is mounting daily. The U.S.-Canada conflict has sent shockwaves through the international community. European allies urge restraint, fearing the dispute will weaken Western unity. China and Russia see opportunity, highlighting instability in Western alliances. The G7 is divided, with emergency meetings ending in deadlock. NATO faces a crisis as two founding members clash, undermining collective defense. The USMCA trade pact is under severe strain, with the U.S. bypassing dispute mechanisms. Mexico calls for peace but remains neutral. The conflict shows that even robust agreements can be quickly undermined by political will. Global alliances are being tested as never before. The crisis has polarized public opinion in both countries. In Canada, a surge of nationalism supports the blockade, especially in the east, while Western provinces and business leaders warn of economic disaster. Many Canadians see the move as overdue assertion of sovereignty, but others fear a miscalculation. In the U.S., Republicans overwhelmingly back Trump's tough response, viewing Canada's action as a provocation. Conservative media frames it as a betrayal by a once reliable neighbor. Democrats and independents are more critical, calling for diplomacy over confrontation. The public is deeply divided, complicating any path to resolution. Nationalist sentiment is rising on both sides. Political polarization makes compromise difficult. The rift is as much social as it is political. The crisis is taking on a military dimension. Operation Alaskan Resolve involves a massive U.S. airlift and naval escort to supply Alaska. Canada has raised its military alert, increasing patrols along the border and in the Arctic. The future of NORAD, the symbol of US-Canada defense integration, is now in question. The standoff has strategic implications for the Arctic, where Russia and China are expanding their presence. A breakdown in US-Canada cooperation weakens the Western position in the region. The risk of miscalculation is real, with military forces operating in close proximity. Defense officials are keeping communication lines open to prevent incidents. As long as political leaders remain confrontational, the military risk remains high. The Arctic is now a potential flashpoint in this escalating crisis. US-Canada relations are in their deepest crisis in modern history. Canada's blockade of Alaska was a dramatic move to address long-standing grievances. The US response, massive tariffs and military operations, has escalated the conflict. The result? A dangerous cycle threatening a $900 billion trading relationship and destabilizing North America. Key alliances like NATO and the USMCA are under strain. The world watches with alarm as nationalist sentiment surges on both sides. Military posturing in the Arctic raises the stakes further. The world's longest undefended border is now a symbol of division. Trust has been shattered, and the endgame is uncertain. The future of one of history's most successful partnerships hangs in the balance.